Welcome to Dad Talk Today. The podcast for dads facing some of the toughest moments of their lives. We are here to walk with men through divorce, keep them connected to their kids, help them understand their rights, and work for change in family law courts. Moms, you are always welcome too. We are all about advocating for shared parenting and doing what is best for our kids. Here is your host, Carroll.
Hey everybody, welcome to Dad Talk Today. We got a very special guest with us today, Mr. Joshua Philipp from the Epoch Times.
Real pleasure being here. Thanks for having me.
Yes. So Josh, we've got to talk to you a few times about what's going on in the father's rights community. Tell us a little bit about how you're familiar with everything that's going on.
Well, part of my work, of course, I think everyone's seen what I do on China, talking about Chinese subversion in the United States, but a lot of my work too is talking about communist subversion, because part of my research into what the CCP is doing here in the US led me to go back and look at the history, which brought up the whole issue of ideological subversion, what the Soviets were doing back to the Frankfurt School, back to movements even before that. And when you get into it, a big part of it is destruction of the family.
Absolutely. Yep. I mean, do you see that in many other countries? People think this is just like a United States issue.
This has been going on since, you could argue at least the time of Marx, mid 1800s, but really even before that, going back to late 1700s. This goes back to the Enlightenment, the idea that you could remake mankind, destroy everything that previously existed, create a new man, and that would be like the future society remade through this whole French Enlightenment type mindset. Going back to, for example, the French Revolution. And really, a lot of people don't understand Marxism. They get into it. You go and read the Communist Manifesto. It says right there, right? Communism abolishes eternal truths. And what is eternal truth, right? And then it says communism abolishes all religion and all morality. If you get into books like The Holy Family and other ones, they talk about destroying the family. This is one of the main goals of communism. And why do they do this? Well, it's based on this whole, really, we can get into the details of it, based on this whole idea. The goal of communism is not an economic goal. The debate ended on economics because they couldn't win debates on economics. That's just where the argument is. If you go back and read Ludwig von Mises in his book Socialism, for example, he talks about this. Communism was always about metaphysics and ontology. It's more like a belief. And here's what it was based in. If you go and read Marx and Hegel and Engels and so on, you get into Hegelianism and Hegelian dialectic. I don't want to sound too complicated, but
right.
This is what Marx pulled his stuff from. Hegelian dialectic was one of the main metaphysical theories in Europe at the time of Marx. And one of the main theories is the idea of the negation of the negation. And you hear me out, right? I know it sounds all mystical and stuff like that, but Marx even criticized him on this too, right? But negation of negation is this. It's the idea that through the destruction of an existing institution, something new, something higher will be born from it. And so Hegel talked about, the destruction of the seed, and the plant is born from the destruction of the seed, the destruction of the egg, and how, the chicken is born from the destruction of the egg. And so Marx said, well, if we destroy everything, then, shouldn't we create some kind of higher realized purpose for mankind? And Marxism is really just a formula for destruction of all previously existing institutions. All morality, all religion, destruction of the family, destruction of belief, destruction of tradition, and they believe that through this destruction, somehow a new system is going to be born. That is the basis of Marxism.
Absolutely, man. And you destroy the family, you destroy a society. I'm curious, we see very little politicians talking about this. Why do you think that is?
Well, they talk about it on one side, that's for sure. Oh, yeah. They definitely talk about the destruction of the family on one side. But, here's the thing. I think a lot of people, don't get this side of Marxism, and they don't get this side of progressivism. They don't understand any of this. For them, it really is the cause, and a lot of them are true believers. They actually believe in this stuff. They don't look at the actual results of what they're calling for, though. They don't look at what the results are when you destroy the nuclear family. You know, you look at these Marxist organizations, even like Black Lives Matter, they had it on their website for a while, they deleted it, but destroy the nuclear family. Why are they talking about destroying the nuclear family? And people saw that and like, what do you mean? You know, I thought this is about racial equality, not destroying the nuclear family. What do? They go and delete it from their website. A lot of the real Marxists know this, a lot of the other ones are just real true believers, but they don't think about the impact of it. They don't think about the impact of destroying, you know, the role of fathers, the role of destroying the balance between men and women, the role of destroying even, you know, through feminism. When I was in community college, I wrote a paper on it. I accidentally took a feminism class, and I didn't know what I was getting into. It was called the History of Art, or History of Women in Art, and I was like, oh great, you know, cool, like, you know, like I want to learn about that. It's a feminist class, and you know, ended up being just a class on feminism. And actually I wrote my final paper arguing that feminism is an anti-women's movement because it demonizes feminine virtues. It demonizes what women are, and it tells them they should be more like men, even though it's not portrayed like that. It tells them that the role men play and the virtues men have are what women should want, and that everything that they are, right, this gentle, caring, nurturing nature, is somehow a persecutory frame put on them. And by encouraging men to become like, or women to become like men, they started encouraging men to become like women. And this whole inversion of this, destroying this entire structure, and then creating conflict between men and women, turning them against each other, is really, I think, the worst thing you could possibly do to families.
And you're exactly right, because there's, you know, women who bought into this feminist model, and they, you know, didn't get married, they didn't have children. Now these women in their 40s and 50s, and they're saying, you know what, I'm unhappy. I was lied to. So, you know, feminism is a huge lie that was sold to women, like, this is how to be happy. And you go back in time before the toxic feminism came through. Women were happy, children were healthy, marriages did remain intact. So you're exactly right.
Well, and you know, I think people have been kind of portrayed with this real warped image of what happiness is and what
Yes.
life is. You don't need to, you know, become a best-selling author, become a lawyer, make a whole bunch of money to be happy, right? Happiness doesn't come from that. I've seen plenty of extremely wealthy, miserable people, right? You know, actually in a lot of cultures, Japan, ancient China, a lot of your happiness was measured by how many people you had in your household. You know, having your mother and your father and your kids and your aunts and uncles, and, you know, having this big family and the warmth that comes from that. And really, I think society, thinking they're going to find happiness really through, you know, wealth and all these things. And it's good to be comfortable. It's good to have enough to take care of yourself. But you find a lot of people who get that and they realize that they're lonely. They realize it's cold. They realize they don't have families. They realize that they wasted their youth when they could have had a family. And the hard realization that they've lost that possibility, that is now far beyond in the past, and they don't have the ability to have that. That is a heart-wrenching, just soul-crushing realization for a lot of people. And really, I think these whole movements have really sold people false happiness. And not only sold them that, but really destroyed, and are trying to destroy even further, all of these institutions.
How do you think identity politics has played into this? You know, it's crazy because we've seen the Democrats go after the African American vote, and I saw on election night they was telling them to vote like a mother. The African American community right now is plagued by an 80% fatherless rate.
Yeah, well, I'll tell you an analogy, right? I don't think this was I don't think this actually really happened, but it's an analogy that was told oftentimes in the Soviet Union, right? They said that they were, you know, some guys are walking with Stalin, and they ask, how do you control a population? And Stalin says, watch this, let me show you. There's a chicken on the ground. He reaches down, grabs the chicken, rips out every one of its feathers, puts it back down, and hands it a handful of grain. And he says, from here on out, this chicken will depend on me for everything it needs. You create dependency, and by creating dependency, you create slaves. You make slaves to the system. And that's exactly what they're doing with these types of policies. They are eliminating the foundations that allow for independence. They're eliminating the foundations that allow for people to take care of themselves, to take care of their families, to take care of others. By eliminating these things, they create a dependent population that needs big government and that depends on big government for every bit of their wealth, every bit of their happiness, every bit of their comfort. That is what they're doing with these types of things.
Well, in many cases, the mom is more financially stable if the father's outside of the house. She can get all of this different assistance. I mean, it's exactly what you're talking about. I mean, it's crazy to see how the decline in the importance of fathers is just going away every day. Tell us about some of the importance of fathers in your eyes, Josh, and what a father provides to his children.
Well, I've done a lot of thinking about this, and I like to read a lot about traditional books. This is the reality for men. I'm a millennial technically, right? And I think we were one of the first pioneer generations born into the destruction of the nuclear family and raised by TV and having internet and so on, right? The lock and key generation, right? We see the results of that with a lot of people in my generation. I really had to go back and learn a lot of virtues myself. I turned to Aristotle, Marcus Aurelius. I turned to Japanese Confucianism, guys like Yamaga Soko and so on, to ancient wisdom, whether it be China, Japanese, European, and so on, and really understanding what the role of fathers were and what the role of a leader was. And if you go back into it, it wasn't some persecutory, masculine, macho, beating everyone beneath me type of thing. It talked about that a leader should love his people. This same principle was applied to men, that it comes from love, right? One of my old mentors actually was actually a monk, matter of fact. I trained under a Catholic monk, trained under a Catholic priest. One thing he told me was that the reason men need to be strong, right? The reason men need to be strong isn't out of some kind of macho nature. It's to make others feel strength as well. You give strength to others. He talked, for example, about, that, I'll give you one example. I used to, if I got hurt, for example, I was traveling for a while. If I got hurt, for example, I'd make a big deal about it. He sat me down one day and he said, Josh, the reason why men, don't show pain isn't because, again, you're trying to act tough. The reason you don't show pain is because usually if you're going through hardships, others around you are also going through the same type of hardships, and they look to you for strength. They look to you to be that anchor. And you need to, be strong and be tough, not out of some kind of self-validation, but for the sake of others. And really, it's true. You know what I mean? When people are in rough situations, they look to someone who is stable and calm and can face that trial and deal with it calmly and rationally and with strength. And that was the role that men played in the family. That is the reason men need to be strong. And destroying that, right, makes not only the men feel weaker and demasculized, but also women feel like they can't depend on them. It makes children feel like they can't feel safe. And really destroying all these foundations and only focusing on the worst parts of humanity eliminates any discussion on the positive sides of these values and the positive sides of these traits.
Well, you see what's going on our TV shows all the time. The image of dad is just this bumbling idiot that doesn't know what he's doing, and they give out this myth of toxic masculinity. We are suffering from a severe case of lack of masculinity. Yes,
and I'll say too, I think there's a public misconception that these judges are as well versed in the importance of fathers as you are, and that the legislators look at what's best for the families when they're enacting policies and laws, and that's simply not the case. A lot of our judges, there's no training whatsoever, so they come up with their public school ideology or their own perspectives, and they're on the bench making these decisions every single day, taking dads out of the picture. So how do you think that we can address these judges or the legislators when they're enacting these laws that affect all of us?
Well, this is the problem I see with society, is that people act based on the education they have. And if they don't have acts, even myself trying to research this stuff, it's not easy.
Right.
I've had to go back, reading books hundreds of years old to try to learn what men lost.
Yep.
And school's not going to teach you it. A lot of mentors even are not going to teach you it. It's really hard to find these types of things. When it comes to virtues and male virtues, I think Jordan Peterson is one of the few guys who's really talked about this on the public stage. And, watching some of his stuff, I was like, maybe I'll go, study, Carl Jung and stuff and see what he had to say as well. And actually dig into it. He talks about some of the same stuff. The problem with masculinity isn't real masculinity. It's what they call boy nature. It's little boys trying to act like men, but and you can't beat them up for it either. They've never had anyone to teach them otherwise. It's boy nature, this self-centered masculinity. Masculinity, being a man, and really being a woman too. It's not about selfishness. It's about caring for others. Women have their own way of caring for others. Men have their own way of caring for others, and really trying to perfect these qualities within ourselves is part of the human experience. You know what I mean? Part of that human experience of becoming a better person is learning to be more caring, right? And using the virtues you're given to demonstrate that, and people feel it. You know what I mean?
Absolutely. I tell you what, Josh, thank you so much, man. I love watching your stuff. You've done some of the best documentaries I've ever watched in my life. I mean, I aspire to be more like this guy. He is so spot on, and I loved your take on that. Could you tell everybody where they could find your show?
All right, so you can go to Crossroads with Joshua Phillip on YouTube, and also I'm on the Epoch Times website. That's the Epoch Times, TheEpochTimes.com.
And I'd like to say thank you also for giving us some time and letting us, talk about what's going on in your shows.
My pleasure. Yeah, real pleasure. Thanks again.
All right, guys.
Thank you for joining us tonight. We are fighting for the rights of parents worldwide. If you want to help support our podcast and for us to continue this mission, please join us at patreon.com/dadtalktoday. You will find us on Facebook, YouTube, Instagram, Twitter, CloutHub, Parler, iHeartRadio, Stitcher, Spotify, the podcast app, Google, Apple Podcasts. We're a little bit of everywhere. And guys, every time you like and subscribe, you help us continue this mission. Thank you, and we will see you next time.